Hello everyone. Please like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our stories.
Sunday mornings in the Ingalls household always began in the gentle hush of pre-dawn light. Even before the first rays of sun crept over the horizon, Ma was awake, moving quietly through the little house. She stoked the embers in the fireplace, coaxing them to life, and set about making breakfast as the winter wind whispered through the woods outside. The cold pressed against the windows, yet inside the air was filled with the comforting scent of fresh bread and the soft sounds of Ma's careful preparations. As the sky slowly brightened, Pa would rise and gently wake Laura and Mary. His voice, warm and steady, carried special meaning on this day. "It's Sunday," he would say, and those words brought a hush of anticipation. Sunday was not like any other day. It was a day set apart, a day for rest, for reflection, and for family. The girls would dress quietly, their movements careful, as if not to disturb the peace that filled the house. Breakfast on Sunday was always a little different. The family gathered around the table, speaking softly, savoring the simple meal and the time together. The usual hustle and bustle of chores was set aside. Instead, there was a sense of calm, as if the whole world slowed down to honor the day. After breakfast, Ma would tidy the house, her hands moving with practiced ease. She smoothed the tablecloth, swept the floor, and arranged everything just so. Meanwhile, Pa would lead Laura and Mary outside, their breath puffing in the crisp morning air. Together, they would gather a few dried twigs and leaves, their boots crunching on the frosty ground. Even in the cold, there was a quiet beauty to the woods. The bare branches etched against the pale sky, the hush broken only by the call of a distant bird. Once the chores were done, the family would settle in the warm glow of the fireplace. The flames flickered and danced, casting soft shadows on the walls. There was no church nearby, no steeple or bell to call them to worship. But in their little home, the Ingalls family created their own sacred space. Ma would open the worn family Bible, her voice gentle and clear as she read a passage. Sometimes she chose verses about kindness and forgiveness, about the strength found in faith and the comfort of love. Pa would close his eyes and offer a quiet prayer, his words simple but heartfelt. Afterward, Ma would teach Laura and Mary the hymns she remembered from her own childhood. Their voices, sweet and a little shy at first, would fill the room, rising and falling in harmony. The songs spoke of hope and gratitude, of the beauty in each new day. In those moments, the little house seemed to glow with warmth, the music weaving a tapestry of comfort and belonging. When the weather was gentle enough, Pa would sometimes take the girls for a short walk in the woods. They would bundle up in their warmest coats, their cheeks rosy from the cold. Together, they would wander among the pine trees, the needles soft underfoot, the air sharp and clean. Pa would point out the tracks of rabbits and deer, telling stories of the animals that made their homes in the woods. He spoke of how they survived the long winter, finding food and shelter, and of his own adventures as a young man, exploring the wild places of the world. These walks were never long, for winter days were short and the cold could be biting. But even a few moments outside were enough to fill the girls with wonder. They learned to notice the small things, a bird's nest hidden in the branches, the way the snow sparkled in the sun, the quiet strength of the trees standing tall against the wind. Back at home, Sunday afternoons were spent in peaceful companionship. The girls would sit together by the fire, their needles flashing as they embroidered or sewed small shirts for themselves. Sometimes Ma would join them, her hands deft and sure, guiding them with gentle patience. Pa would whittle small toys from scraps of wood, his knife moving with practiced skill, or he would mend tools, humming a tune under his breath. There was a special kind of happiness in these simple tasks, a sense of purpose and pride in what they created together. The house was filled with the soft sounds of work and laughter, the warmth of the fire and the love that bound them all. As the afternoon faded and the light outside grew dim, Ma would prepare a light supper. The family would gather once more round the table, sharing stories and memories. Pa, with a twinkle in his eye, would tell tales of his youth, of distant forests and wild rivers, of friends met along the way, of narrow escapes and lessons learned. Laura and Mary listened wide-eyed, each story a window into a world beyond their own, though Pa's stories were not always filled with mystery or excitement. To Laura and Mary, they were treasures. Each tale carried a lesson, a reminder to be brave, to be kind, to cherish the simple joys of life. Through his words, the girls learned about the world, about the people who lived in it, and about the values that mattered most. As darkness settled outside, the family would gather for one last prayer. Ma's voice, soft and steady, would lead them in thanks for the blessings of the day. Then, with the fire burning low and the house wrapped in quiet, Ma would sing a gentle lullaby. The melody drifted through the rooms, soothing and sweet, a promise of safety and love. Laura and Mary would slip into bed, snuggling under warm quilts, their hearts full. Outside, the winter wind might howl, and the woods might seem vast and lonely, but inside, in the glow of the fire and the embrace of family, every Sunday was a day of peace, love, and hope. It was a time to remember what mattered most, a time to rest, to reflect, and to be together. In that little house, Sunday was more than just a day of the week. It was a celebration of faith, of family, and of the quiet joys that filled their lives. And as Laura drifted off to sleep, she knew that no matter how cold or dark the world might be outside, within these walls, she was safe, cherished, and loved. On a cold winter morning, when the world outside was covered in a thick white blanket of snow, the Ingalls family woke to the sound of the north wind howling through the trees. The little house creaked and groaned in the icy air, but inside it was warm and snug. Pa stirred the fire, sending sparks dancing up the chimney, while Ma set about making a hearty breakfast for the family. The girls, Laura and Mary, bundled in their woolen dresses, watched as frost gathered on the window panes, tracing delicate patterns that looked like ferns and feathers. After breakfast, Pa stood by the door, his long rifle resting on his shoulder. His eyes, bright and steady, met Laura's and Mary's. "Today," he said, "you girls are coming with me. It's time you learned how we live in these woods and how we fill our table through the hardest months." The girls' hearts fluttered with a mixture of excitement and nerves. They had heard stories of Pa's hunting trips, of wild animals and deep forests, but this would be their first time to see it for themselves. They wrapped themselves in thick shawls and mittens, and Pa helped them fasten their boots axely. The snow outside was deep, crunching under their feet as they stepped into the pale morning light. The woods, stripped of their summer leaves, stood silent and solemn. The only sound was the wind, sighing through the branches and the occasional caw of a crow overhead. Pa led the way, his footprints making a narrow path through the snow. Laura followed close behind, her breath making little clouds in the cold air, and Mary walked beside her, holding tight to her sister's mittened hand. They passed the frozen stream, where the water was locked beneath a sheet of ice, and the trees stood tall and bare, their branches reaching for the sky. As they moved deeper into the woods, Pa spoke in a low voice, teaching the girls to walk softly, to listen for the sounds of animals, and to watch for tracks in the snow. "The woods are full of life, even in winter," he said. "You just have to know where to look." Laura watched as Pa bent to examine a set of tracks, pointing out the wide, heavy prints that could only belong to a bear. After a while, Pa stopped suddenly and held up his hand. Laura's heart thumped in her chest as she followed his gaze. Ahead, among the tall pines, two large shapes moved slowly through the snow. One was black as midnight, the other a smoky grey. The bears were foraging, their noses buried in the snow, searching for roots or any scraps of food the forest might offer. The girls stood perfectly still, barely daring to breathe. The bears were enormous, their fur thick and glossy, their powerful bodies moving with a slow, deliberate grace. Their eyes glinted in the pale light, watchful but unafraid. Pa knelt beside the girls, whispering, "Remember, we must respect these creatures. They are not our enemies, but we must be careful, for they are strong and wild." Pa raised his rifle and took careful aim. The crack of the gunshot shattered the silence, echoing through the trees. The black bear staggered, wounded but not down. Pa's face was calm, his hands steady as he reloaded and moved closer. The girls watched, wide-eyed, as Pa fired again, this time at the grey bear. The second shot found its mark, and the grizzly collapsed into a drift of snow. For a moment, everything was still. The wind whispered through the trees, and the snowflakes drifted gently down, settling on the bear's thick fur. Laura and Mary stood in awe, not frightened but filled with a deep respect for both the wild animals and for their father's courage. Pa approached the fallen bear carefully, making sure it was safe. Then he turned to the girls, his voice gentle but firm. "This is how we survive in the woods," he said. "We take what we need, but never more. We must always give thanks, and remember that all life is precious." With Pa's help, the girls learned how to help prepare the bears for the journey home. It was hard work, but they did not complain. They felt proud to be part of something so important, to know that they were helping to provide for their family. As they made their way back through the woods, dragging the bears behind them, Laura felt a new sense of strength and responsibility growing inside her. She realized that living in the wilderness was not just about surviving the cold and the hunger. It was about working together, respecting the land and its creatures, and finding courage even when things seemed difficult or frightening. When they reached the little house, Ma and baby Carrie came out to greet them. Ma's eyes widened in surprise and relief when she saw the size of the bears. She hugged Laura and Mary tightly, her face shining with pride. That night, Ma cooked a hearty meal from the bear meat, filling the house with rich, delicious smells. The family gathered around the table, grateful for the food and for each other. As darkness fell and the wind rattled the windows, Pa sat by the fire, his voice warm and steady as he told the story of the day's hunt. Laura and Mary listened, their eyes shining in the firelight, feeling the warmth of the little house and the strength of their family. In the days that followed, the Ingalls family worked together to prepare the bear meat for the winter. Ma salted and smoked the meat, making sure nothing would go to waste. Pa stretched the bear hides, which would be made into warm rugs and coats. Every part of the animal was used, just as Pa had taught the girls. On those long winter nights, when the wind howled outside and the snow piled high against the door, the Ingalls family sat together by the fire, telling stories and singing songs. Laura felt safe and loved, knowing that together they could face any challenge. She understood now more than ever the importance of courage, respect, and the unbreakable bond of family. Through this experience, Laura and Mary grew stronger and wiser. They learned that the wilderness could be harsh, but it was also beautiful and full of wonders. And most of all, they learned that with love, courage, and hard work, they could overcome anything the world might bring. The story of the two big bears became one of their favorite memories, a reminder of the day they stood side by side with Pa in the snowy woods and learned what it truly meant to be part of the Ingalls family. As the first pale light of dawn crept across the prairie, the Ingalls family stirred from their beds, the chill of autumn seeping through the log walls of their little house. Outside, a thin frost sparkled on the grass, promising a day cold enough for the important work ahead. But inside, the warmth from Ma's stove and the smell of baking biscuits offered comfort and reassurance. Today was the day the family would butcher the pig, a day of hard work, but also of tradition, learning, and preparation for the long winter to come. Pa was always the first to rise, moving quietly so as not to wake Laura and Mary too soon. He dressed quickly, donning his old work shirt and sturdy boots, and stepped outside to check on the pig in the pen. The animal, a fat, healthy suckling pig, was the result of months of careful feeding and tending. Pa had chosen it with care, knowing that it would provide the family with meat, lard, and other necessities to see them through the cold months ahead. When Pa returned, Ma was already bustling about the kitchen. She had risen early as well, knowing that the family would need a hearty breakfast to sustain them through the long day. The aroma of frying salt pork and fresh biscuits filled the air, mingling with the sharp scent of coffee. Laura and Mary, woken by the familiar sounds and smells, hurried to dress and wash up, eager to help, but also a little nervous about the work to come. At breakfast, the family sat close together, their breath misting in the cool morning air. Ma reminded Laura and Mary of the importance of the day's work. "This is how we make sure we have enough to eat through the winter," she said gently. "It's not always easy, but it's necessary. Remember to listen to Pa and help where you can." After breakfast, each family member took up their assigned tasks. Ma cleared the table and began preparing the kitchen for the work ahead. She would be in charge of rendering the fat into lard, salting the meat, and making sure nothing went to waste. Laura and Mary, wrapped in their warmest shawls, followed Pa outside. Their job was to help keep the working area clean and to fetch and carry as Pa needed. The pig stood quietly in the pen, its breath curling in the cold air. Laura felt a pang of sadness as she looked at the animal they had fed and cared for. But she remembered Ma's words. This was the way of life on the prairie. Every family depended on the animals they raised, not just for companionship, but for survival. Pa worked methodically, his movements careful and practiced. He had done this many times before, and he took care to show Laura and Mary each step, explaining as he went. "We use every part of the pig he told them, his voice steady. "Nothing goes to waste. The meat will feed us, the fat will make lard for cooking, and even the bones can be boiled for soup." Once the butchering was done, Pa and the girls carried the meat into the kitchen, where Ma was ready with her sharp knives and clean pans. Together, they cut the meat into large pieces, sorting it carefully. Some would be salted and packed away in barrels for long-term storage. Other cuts would be smoked to make ham and bacon. Ma set aside the trimmings to be ground into sausage, and the fat to be rendered into lard. As they worked, Laura's initial discomfort faded, replaced by a sense of pride. She was learning important skills: how to cut the meat, how to salt and pack it, how to help provide for her family. She watched Ma and Pa closely, trying to remember every detail. Mary, too, worked quietly and diligently, her face set in concentration. By midday, the kitchen was filled with the sounds and smells of their labor: the sizzle of fat in the pot, the rhythmic thud of knives on the cutting board, the salty tang of curing meat. Ma's hands moved quickly as she packed the salted pork into crocks, covering each layer with coarse salt to preserve it through the winter. Laura and Mary took turns turning the sausage grinder, watching as the ground meat emerged in soft pink curls. When the last piece of meat was packed away and the kitchen cleaned, Ma began preparing a special dinner to celebrate the day's work. She roasted a piece of fresh pork, seasoning it with sage and onions, and baked a pie from the last of the summer apples. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, the family gathered around the table, tired but satisfied. Pa carved the roast, his face alight with pride. "You girls did good work today," he said, passing slices of tender meat to Laura and Mary. "You're learning the skills you'll need to take care of your own families one day." After dinner, as the kitchen grew quiet and the shadows lengthened, Pa sat by the fire and told stories of past pig butcherings, of winters when the snow lay deep and the wind howled outside, but the family was safe and warm inside, with plenty to eat. Laura listened, her head resting on Ma's shoulder, feeling the warmth of the fire and the closeness of her family. Though she still felt a little sad for the pig, she understood now why this work was so important. It was more than just preparing food. It was about working together, learning from each other, and making sure the family would survive whatever the winter might bring. As the last embers glowed in the hearth, Laura thought about the day's work and the many days like it that lay ahead. She knew that each task, no matter how hard or unpleasant, was a part of the rhythm of life on the prairie. Through these shared experiences, the Ingalls family grew stronger, their bond deepened by the knowledge that together they could face any hardship. And so, as the prairie night settled in and the wind whispered outside, the Ingalls family drifted off to sleep, their hearts full and their larder well stocked, ready to meet the winter with courage and hope.